strange to start a funeral to say it is good to see you all. But it is, because it is good to see our community and our beloveds and all of the people who loved Howard and who love each other here in this room. It has been a long time for many of us being together this way. And while we always wish that it were under simplest to come together, it is what we do as Jews and as human beings, which is to gather and to be here and to remember with such deep love our friend Howard Ellegant. When someone is sick for a number of years, we all imagine this time will come, and it's not a surprise when it does. But it hurts all the more because we've been carrying an anticipated grief with us. And so we are here to honor, to celebrate, and to remember Howard Ellegant, the beloved husband of Carol, the wonderful and dedicated father of David and of Deborah, Alex, and the most favorite and wonderful and special grandpa to Leah, who loved him so much. And to remember and to be here together in community as friends, to remember our friend, all of the years that we spent building and singing and working and constructing and planning and studying and gathering together. And so we are here today in our shared grief and sadness and in our very, very deep love as we begin this physical process of saying goodbye to Howard. The ritual of Kriya, of tearing, is the ritual of physically marking, as we do in so many of our rituals, the outside of a tear that is happening so very deeply inside. And so, Carol and David and Deborah, all of you that are wearing the ribbons, I invite you to stand as we come to tear them. The blessing that we say is blessing Dayan Ha'emet, the knower of truths, knowing that our knowledge in this world is limited and that there are greater awarenesses. But we also say, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, hakarov lenishberei lev, the one who is close to the brokenhearted. Ecclesiastes, the book of Kohelet, that we chant in the time of Sukkot, that we chant in the time of harvest.
יזרח השמש ובשמש ואל מקומו שואף זרחו שם הולך אל דרום מסובב אל צפון סובב סובב הולך הרוח, אז ליבותיו שלטה רוח. כל הנחלים הולכים אל הים, והים איננו מלא אל מקום, שהנחלים הולכים שם, הם שבים ללב.
Generations come and generations go, and all come from this place of the sea and return to the sea, and the sea is never full. There is time for everything, says Ecclesiastes. Although, and I think Howard would appreciate, a slightly other view that does not just say, there is a time and a season for every purpose. But the poet Yehuda Amichai also wrote, a man in his life doesn't have enough time to have time for everything. He has no room to have room for every desire. Ecclesiastes was mistaken to claim that. A man has to grieve and love all at once, and with the same eyes to cry and to laugh, with the same hands throw and gather stones, make love in war and war in love, and hate and forget and remember and forget in so many long years of history. A man in his life has no time. When he loses, he seeks. When he finds, he forgets. When he forgets, he loves. And when he loves, he begins forgetting all over again. And his soul is knowing and very professional. Only his body is amateur and fumbles and tries and fumbles. But then, in autumn, he will die like a fig, shriveled and sweet and full of himself. The leaves dry out on the ground, and the branches point to the place where there is time for everything. Howard was sweet and kind and good, and would answer the phone in a way that had a little laugh and a little comforting, and would come and would be with everyone. It wouldn't be possible to tell all of his years, his 81 years, in this brief time that we're here this morning. What we do is open a door to remember, to let all of the memories that you have of Howard come flooding back, to remember the times that you sat in this room with him, or around your tables with him, or in the sanctuaries, the old building, the new building, the time in which he was in your backyards, in which you were in the home that he and Carol so beautifully loved and built together. Howard had dear friends, and first we invite one of his oldest friends, Richard Roper, to come and share his memories and stories of your dear friend Howard.
In the 1967 movie, The Producers, written by Mel Brooks, the phrase, "That's it, baby, when you've got it, flaunt it," was shouted out by Max Bialystock, played by Zero Mostel. Howard Ellegant was a man who had it, but he never flaunted it. He was a quiet man, a rational man, and especially an intelligent man who helped others and never bragged or sought credit for the mitzvahs he did throughout his life. Howard grew up on the west side of Chicago. His family lived in the 300 building that boasted an elevator. Very odd for that part of the city. His boyhood chums would go to that building just to ride the elevator. And when they were braced by building tenants and asked, "What are you guys doing here?" they would reply, "We came to visit our friend, Howard Ellegant." I met Howard in 1955. The Jewish Community Center's teen canteen, where kids learn to dance and socialize. We put on skits, one where he and I, along with a couple of other guys, lip-synced the policeman's song from Gilbert and Sullivan's Pirates of Penzance. I think Howard and I were the only ones who knew where the song came from and what it was about. We were friends at Austin High School, where we were both thinking about engineering as a profession. That wasn't in the cards for me, but Howard became an architect and later did value engineering. After high school, I lost track of Howard for a half a century. I heard about a road trip he took in the 1960s with another friend, Nat Bilski, who's with us today over there, and the time that they spent together at an Indian reservation in Arizona called Canyon de Chelly. Nat wasn't sure what they were doing there, but Howard knew people there. He had helped people there, and he had contacts there. I knew that he had gone into the Peace Corps to serve his country by helping others. He had spent time helping people in Central America using his architectural skills in developing housing in small villages. Everything I heard about him was helping. He helped a young man, I think who was from Costa Rica, to become a lawyer. He was proud of that accomplishment, but he never bragged about it. Then one morning in 2008, after I had not seen Howard for half a century, I got on the Northwestern train station in Evanston to go to work downtown, and there sitting on the train was Howard Ellegant. And we both said, "What are you doing here?" He was doing value engineering. I was working at Jewish Vocational Service. Our friendship didn't miss a step from that point until it ended 15 years ago. 15 years later. Sorry. Howard, Carol, my wife Betsy, and I did a lot of things together. When I lost my wife in 2012, they reached out to me and invited me for Shabbat dinners and backyard barbecues. And they made me feel comfortable as a single guy. The third, the phrase two's company and three. I had become the third person in every crowd, but they made me feel comfortable as no one else could. When the, excuse me, when the tragedy of his illness struck him, it came at the worst possible time, for the pandemic had just begun. I made sure to keep in touch with him throughout nearly 3 years of his ordeal as he went from trials at Kellogg, the University of Chicago, and finally Northwestern. In each case, the chemotherapy stopped working. His comment to me was that he had managed to flunk out of both the University of Chicago and Northwestern. It wasn't a complaint. It was his dry sense of humor. During his epic battle with cancer, Howard kept many of his friends informed of his progress and his condition through emails, with the subject line saying, "How am I?" His emails were brief, factual, and to the point. That was Howard. He never complained about his ordeal. Friends, my friends, the group from the West Side, talked about this with each other. We agreed that Howard set a standard of class and strength during his illness that few of us felt we could match. He set a standard of how we might try to behave if confronted with a life-threatening illness. We learned much from the example he set, but we weren't sure that we could carry it off as he did. A couple of months ago, I organized a dinner out with the boys. This was something that a half a dozen of us or so would get together a few times a year. We hadn't done it for a long time because of the pandemic. Howard was at a good point between chemo infusions. He was feeling pretty good. We went to Wildfire and we ate and acted like teenagers once more. Howard had ribs and chowed down on them with gusto. The kibitzing went on for a couple of hours, and on the way home in the car, he told me that he hadn't had that much fun in a long time. It was the last time we were together until I visited him in hospice the day before he passed. I will remember him for his strength, his kindness, his good advice that he gave me, and for the friendship that stood the test of time.
From long, long friendships to special and intimate family relationships, Howard cultivated them all. Leah, you made him a grandpa. You had a very special role when you were born. And we know that you wrote a prayer with your Hebrew school class, and that you might want to share it with us. Do you want to come up and read it?
I dedicated this prayer to my grandpa, who loved me very much, and I love him a lot. I'll remember him forever. Dear God, thank you for loving us. You created this world that we all share together. We honor you for that. We are a big family thanks to you. You love us, you care for us, you are there for us when we need you. You deserve something for that. You help us find meaning, you help us find love. Since you do all that for people all across the world, you deserve a gift, a nice gift. Perhaps love, a love that lasts forever. Like the love that lasts forever between me and my grandpa.
Leah helped to write that extraordinary prayer with her Hebrew school class this year and shared it earlier. And I remember sitting with Carol and Howard and talking about how much he loved being able to see you for that service and to share that, and how important it was that you found Jewish summer camp and found a community together. And he loved you so much. So much love. David, I want to invite you to come and share some words about your dad.
So I'll start in a second, but Nat Bilski was actually assistant principal student at Huntington Township High School.
Me too.
And you know what Grandma Rachel was saying about how my dad answered the phone. Hello. You know, that's what he did. Even the evening he came home from chemo, and I knew he was feeling terrible, and maybe rang a couple times. He just wanted to make sure that when he talked to you, you weren't worried about him. That was such a wonderful. There isn't much I can say about my dad that this room doesn't already collectively know. I suppose that tends to happen after hanging around 81 years on this earth. With over 50 years as a pillar of the JRC community. 48 years as my dad. 39 years in the same house, married to Carol and a stepfather to Deborah. 10 years as a grandpa to his cherished Leah. 7 years also as a grandpa to my dog Scout, the sweetest girl you could ever meet and a de facto family therapist. 2 years in the Peace Corps in Colombia. It's part of a 60-year legacy counting, helping a people and a country. So many years, so many lives touched, so many places traveled, so much love given and received. My dad was a lot of things to me. My mentor and my guide, my teacher, my example, my inspiration, my biggest fan, and my most honest critic. My foundation, my rock, my safety net, and as a teenager, maybe even occasionally, my nemesis. My dad was love. Pure, unconditional love. And he was there. He was always there. And that's the void that will be hardest to learn how to accept. I started and stopped this more times than I can count. I got angry, frustrated, sad, I cried. And what can I say that would even touch on who my dad was and convey what he meant to me, our family, our community, and every life that he came across. And that's when the old adage, write what you know, came to mind. I know my dad was an awesome dad. I know that when I was 5 years old and my parents got divorced and had shared custody, he chose to live walking distance from my mom, so it was easy to see. I know when his job as an architect with the Army Corps of Engineers moved from downtown Chicago to Rock Island, he left that job and started his own consulting business to stay close to me. I know when I was 13 and my mom died, he spent 2 weeks sleeping next to me. I on a twin bed, and my dad, in his mid-40s, on the floor, on a Japanese futon that was not designed for the average-sized adult American male. My dad gave me a priority. I didn't recognize it then, of course, but he was helping me to learn about love, empathy, sympathy, and about family. I know my dad didn't get upset when I broke my first window playing fast pitch in the driveway of our house, and I was pretty nervous to tell him. I know he didn't yell when I cracked my first side mirror on the car as a teenager, or when I possibly cracked the other side mirror. And when I may have done something to a taillight or a bumper, you think he got a little perturbed, annoyed, etc., but not angry. The point is, he took things in stride and used these moments as opportunities to teach me about patience, responsibility, and perspective. What he did do was take me to get the replacement glass for the window, and we put it together. He did send me to the auto parts yard to find whatever piece needed to be replaced. He did make me either do the work or call body shops to get estimates if it was something we couldn't do. He did use these opportunities to teach me about something I already mentioned, patience, responsibility, and perspective. Essentially, he understood I was young, and I was growing, and I was learning. And that it was his job to teach me and to impart on me the values he believed would make me a good person. And I know he had an amazing life full of adventure, joy, and loved ones, so many loved ones. To round out the picture of my dad, I wanted to share some of the heartfelt words that have poured in from all of those loved ones, all of you, literally all over the world, that have moved myself and our family so deeply. According to all of you, Howard was a great person and human being. He was one of the kindest and best persons I have ever known. Had a larger-than-life sunny disposition. Never forgot family. Was greatly loved and respected. Loved helping others. Will never be forgotten. And I personally can't convey my gratitude enough for those of you who continue to tell me how much my dad loved me and how proud he was of me and who I became. It's been a sense of letting peace and comfort to hear that from all of you. I'd like to close by sharing some words from a few people I either didn't know or didn't get to know very well. As I said, the Peace Corps was a lifelong passion and love for my dad. Outside of his family, it might be the thing in his life that gave him the most joy and satisfaction. I heard from a few of those people that my dad touched both decades ago and much more recently. Marlon Vargas was a student in Medellin, Colombia, that came from a struggling family. Both my dad and Carol really took to him and admired his drive and how hard that he worked. They became mentors and helped him to see that he could achieve anything he wanted. Marlon, now a successful lawyer who apparently keeps getting new job offers, wrote, "Your father and Carol played a huge role in my life and offered me a kind of love and attention that I hadn't received at the age of 15. He was an incredible man and will be greatly missed. Marlon has also offered to help me with my Spanish." Sam Farr was a Columbia Peace Corps volunteer, a former member of the California State Legislature and U.S. Congress. He's also an avid photographer. Sam said, "My interest in photography first started with your dad. You see, my dad had shown Sam his first home movie of a bullfight he made in Medellin when they were in the Peace Corps. I guess the next day he and Sam went to a store, and Sam bought his first small, used Canon 8mm movie camera. According to Sam, that connection with my dad over photography and home movies blossomed into Ansel Adams being the honorary chair for his campaign to state legislature and subsequently U.S. Congress. He called my dad a silent giant, saying he not only spoke softly about how to fix things that were broken, but he also went down and did it. I can see now that the patient man who took me to the glass door as a child had been that man for a long time. Sam finished by saying, "One person with a life like Carol can make a difference. Your dad did, not only for kids from small, poor barrios in Colombia, but also for one successful congressman in California. Howard Ellegant, a friend, people and countries better help themselves. And last, Maureen North, journalist, author, Columbia Peace Corps volunteer, and founder of the Marina Worth Foundation that my dad and Carol became a part of in their annual trips to teach English and mentor students in Medellin each year. She was grateful for my dad and Carol spending part of their winters in Medellin volunteering. She called it a huge marker for the foundation, saying, "I and the foundation will be forever grateful for Howard's ongoing commitment for Marlon's education, and for Howard and Carol's love, kindness, and support for all the kids you helped. You were able to make Marlon such an example to the many vulnerable kids like you." Maureen shared with me that she actually spoke to my dad about a week before he died. It's a call she now treasures, and one that makes me smile when I think about one of the last people my dad spoke with, being Maureen. One of the last conversations he had was about the Peace Corps in Colombia. And one more thing Maureen told me, and she thought that my dad would get a kick out of it, and I wholeheartedly agree, was that there was going to be a Catholic mass held for him. So, until any of you JRC archivists out there prove me wrong, I'm claiming my dad is the first JRC member to have his life honored both at his Jewish funeral in North America and at Catholic Mass in South America. And it's a fitting tribute for my dad, a larger-than-life silent giant who made everyone's life he touched better.
The 23rd Psalm. Mizmor David, Adonai Roli V'echzor, Yinod D'Sheyer B'Tzei, Armei Menuchot, Yenach Aleini, Nafshi Yishovev, Yancheni V'mach L'Tzedek, Yancheni V'mach L'Tzedek, L'ma'an Shemo. Kom Kyrie Begetzon Mavet, Lo Hirara Ki Ata Imadi, Shivtecha Umishantecha, Hema Yinachamuni. Baruch Lefanai, Shulchan Neged Tzorerai, Nishan Tov Hashem Ben Rashi, Chosi Levaya. Ach tov, ach chesed, yerdifuni chol yemei chayai, v'shaveti bevet Adonai le'orech yamin. Adonai Roli V'echzor, Adonai Roli V'echzor.
You are my shepherd, I shall never be in need. Amid the choicest grasses does God set me down. God leads me beside the calmest waters and restores my soul. God leads me along paths of righteousness in keeping with the honor of God's name, and even should I wander in a valley of the darkest shadows, I will not be afraid. You are with me, Your power and support are there to comfort me. You set in front of me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall come to dwell inside the house of the Eternal forever. Goodness and loving kindness all the days of our lives. We could not ask for more. Howard's story is one that we can all tell in so many different ways, in all of the ways that we knew him and loved him. From his childhood in the Austin neighborhood in the west side of Chicago, Delano Grammar School, Austin High School, which also had technical and college courses both at the same time. I listened yesterday to an interview that Howard did. When you simply enter a Google search for Howard Ellegant, one of the things that comes up is a Peace Corps interview that he did in 2009. It's a little over an hour long and tells the stories in Howard's own voice of growing up and then being part of the Peace Corps and his travels. And it was such a blessing to listen on Shabbat afternoon after sitting with Carol and David and Deborah together in their home to then go and listen and hear Howard's voice telling his story. He graduated from the University of Illinois in architecture and then spent time with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Peace Corps serving infrastructures here at home in this country and externally, building schools and using the engineering background and construction knowledge he had. He then got a master's in urban studies from Loyola University and 5 years later opened his own consulting firm. Howard kept a remarkable funeral file. It's a 3-ring binder that had in it all of the information that he wanted us to say today. Take notes, folks, take notes. Because it is a beautiful recollection in his own words, not only of his own curriculum vitae, but of the people and the phone numbers and all of those that were so important to him to be here, to make sure that nothing was forgotten. His time in Medellin, in Colombia, he designed skills that were built with the labor of the community. Skills he would then bring not only to building schools in South America, but to building our own home right here at JRC. He was one of the principal people that spent time looking for this site and helped us move in, and then was integral to the parts when we decided to rebuild. Howard cared deeply, not just about construction and engineering, but value engineering, which is a multidisciplinary approach to making sure that not only are the processes and the labor and the plans that one uses in constructing or doing a long-term project make the costs lower, but also that they build with the values that the builder is holding dear. To achieve, as he said, project value as opposed to just cost reduction. He tutored English and he kept relationships, as we heard from Marlon, and I believe Marlon is joining us from Colombia by a live stream this morning. Quiero decir a todos que están en Colombia, que están aquí, abrazos fuertes para su amigo, que su espíritu está con nosotros, pero está siempre con ustedes. The entire family in Colombia, who he maintained the relationships with, here, bringing them and bringing us together. Howard met Carol as they were both in groups for single parents, a group for women that Carol was part of and a group for men that Howard was part of. And one time they decided that the two groups should maybe get together. And Howard and Carol hadn't actually met until Carol reached out to get his phone number, to get in touch with Howard, and said she was trying to get a hold of him, and she called him, and Howard was a little flabbergasted, and he said, "Let me get back to you." and then did not for a while. Until several years later, when our own member Marla Baker was facilitating a group at Anshe Emet, a program on being single Jewish parents at the holidays, and invited both Carol and Howard to be panelists. And that time, he waited around and he didn't let Carol get away. And the two of you built such a home full of love and family. You were married in 1984 by Arnie Rothfuss in your backyard. You built your family together that would then grow with David and Deborah and Scout and Alex and Sam and Becky and with Leah, bringing in the cousins and the sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law and so much family together. He was there when Carol had several health scares, including a heart valve collapse at a block party. And he ran to make sure you could get the help right away, and then stayed with you in those weeks in the hospital and anchored and held everyone together. He, as a single dad, and then raising David together, was with you for everything and so much love. And Deborah, through going to college and issues with your computers and many, many moves and many, many ways as you built and brought your family together and finally made him a grandpa. Howard kept relationships with his family. When he was a child, he had gone to visit Cuba with his parents because his aunt had married a Russian who had then gone and settled in Cuba with a business manufacturing and selling silk ties. And decades later, when Howard and Carol were on a trip to Cuba, when once again it opened up again, he remembered the address where the family had lived and where the family business was, and got them to go from the tour to the storefront, and then finding the address, whose streets had changed names, to get them to go to the house that he has pictures of him as a child sitting on the porch, that were then, it turns out, inhabited by a couple of Colombian revolutionaries who lived in, or Cuban revolutionaries who lived in that house and welcomed them in and gave them the tour, and he told stories of what it was like to be in that house as a child decades earlier. Howard kept those relationships. He kept all of the different ways that he was involved, not just in the Peace Corps, not just in Colombia, in his decades and decades long career building and in construction. Howard's projects included courthouses, correctional facilities, transit and transportation, office buildings, manufacturing facilities, treatment plants, sewer systems, public water resources, civil works, hospitals and healthcare, hazardous and toxic waste, manufactured products, and organization and business processes. All of these that Howard wanted us to know. Starting his own consulting company gave him time. In 1971, he joined JRC. We don't have that many members that have been here for over 50 years. Many of you are in that good company. But JRC was an important home for Howard, not just because of the place and the values, but because of the people. Those of you that sat with him at Minyan, that sang with him, that joined Howard and Carol around the table at Passover Seders, that Zoomed with him for Shabbat dinners during the pandemic, that spent time being together. Howard and Carol's home became a hub for the movement for Reconstructing Judaism in Evanston because they conveniently lived just down the block. And they always had an extra room for visiting rabbis, for Deborah Waxman, our president, when she would come and visit and see you, for family members who had Shomer Shabbos relatives that needed to be in close proximity for your family visiting mitzvah, making sure that everyone could be together. He first crowded into that old second floor classroom in the old building with the minion, with the wall that didn't quite always open or close all the way, where we were crowded together with the old ark, knowing it was time to build for something new. cared deeply about making sure that people had what they needed. He took David on an Outward Bound course in high school for a week as they went up to the Boundary Waters, navigating, spending a week together, learning about each other, learning how to build each other up, and deepening their relationship, which he continued to be a supporter of Outward Bound all of these years. He took great joy, not just in that sweet phone call voice when he would call you on the phone, but also in sending out the updates that his friends shared with us. Great joy in people and in efforts to stay in touch with cousins, with family members, perhaps not even sharing everything aloud with people when he was sitting face to face with them, but writing them and making sure that people would be updated. Howard was non-judgmental. He had a lightheartedness and a humor, making sure that everyone had what they needed, but he was also someone who would break the ice in just the right way, with a little bit of a devilish sense of humor and always a twinkle in his eye. There are many, many ways that we will remember Howard in all of our different relationships and lives. And his loss in our congregation is palpable and brings to mind his place in this generation and what he built and created here and all of the love that he had for all of you. His absence is palpable. And he will live in so many different ways in memory. Deborah, for you and your family, as he was always there to listen, to be with you, to be that special grandpa, even when you had a little baby that he would take care of and raise and spend time with. He loved being with you. He loved this community. He loved all of the ways in which this congregation brought people together. He loved his friends and his colleagues and those he met across the world. Howard loved you, Carol, in so many ways. And the two of you were such a presence here at JRC and in the world together. Your travels to China, to Morocco, to Israel, all across the world, when you would say, we should go to that, and even put on the Chinese royalty costumes and say, we should do it. You had adventurous spirit going down to Colombia to teach English, to say, well, we should go do this, because it was the right thing to do, and because you loved each other. You had the blessing of almost 40 years together, building this next chapter in your lives, building, creating, raising your family, and always being here. We know that as much as he took care of you, you took care of him, and that your relationship and your friendship, the deep ways in which you cared and loved for each other, he wanted nothing more. As he said to me after you had gone to take a walk when he and I were sitting a couple of weeks ago in your living room, I just want to make sure that Carol's okay. That was most important to him. Perhaps only second to David, making sure that you were okay. You and your father had such a special relationship when you stopped working a few years ago to become his primary, months ago, to become his primary chaperone and companion, to take him down Lakeshore Drive, all the way down to the hospitals, to sit with him during treatments, to have him reflect back to you of the lake and how he remembered sailing and what that felt like. He was so dedicated to you as your dad. It is a horrible thing to lose both parents to pancreatic cancer, even these many years apart, and horribly ironic. But his dedication to you, to wanting to make sure that you continue to find happiness in the world, you embody so many of his strengths, his care, his presence, that we know he lives on in you, and that we are your community, always going forth. We couldn't possibly tell the entire Howard Ellegant story here in these short minutes. It wouldn't be possible. So it is our responsibility as we are here with wide open hearts, brokenness and loss, to think about how we will integrate those stories into our lives. How will we tell Howard's story for the rest of ours? How will he continue to be known and remembered? What will we think of when we hear something that he used to do, when we study on a Monday morning with your study group? When you hear somebody answer the phone with a joyous twinkle? That is how we live on. Howard fought so diligently and directly this illness, trying new trials until the trials simply wouldn't allow him any more time. But he, always with his sense of humor, also had this cartoon in his funeral file, which says, God put me on this earth to accomplish a certain number of things, and right now I'm so far behind, I will never die. And so, he kept this because the date on it is that it was dedicated to all who have resolved to be more organized in 1994. Apparently, Howard was pretty organized. So many things to do in this lifetime. There couldn't be possibly time for it all. And he lived until his body couldn't any longer. And while the last few days and week were difficult, he had wonderful care, and he died in his home, the place he had cultivated so much love in the weeks before, having heard from so many of you, and knowing that he was full and held by our community. Our traditions remind us that we are only alive as long as the body that is physical can hold us. And that from that moment that we breathe our first breath in at the beginning until we exhale for the last, may it be many years from now, for Howard around 5 o'clock this past Thursday morning. Our body is the vessel that holds us and helps us to put our spirit out into the world. And then, when our soul cannot be contained any longer, our body releases. And so we pray for the release of Howard's neshama, of that beautiful, wonderful essence that was only his soul, that it may rise and come to live in the fabric of the universe, and more importantly, that it may come to live in us as we carry it forward. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we chant El Malay Rahamim, as we pray for Howard Ellegant, that his soul may rise.
El Malay Rahamim, Shochen Ba'amim, Hamse Milchanechon Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הגיע מזהירים את נשמת צבי בן שאול ההגון ואיתה שהלך לעולמו. ענה בן הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור יתרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני נחלתו, וימלוך בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
dwelling in the heavens heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies, the soul of Howard Stephen Ellegant, who has gone to his eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of compassion, shelter him beneath your wings eternally and bind his soul among the living, that he may rest in peace. And we say,
Amen.
Please be seated for a few brief announcements. The interment will take place at West Lawn Cemetery located in Norwich. For those of you joining us in procession, make sure that you receive an orange funeral sticker to be placed on the inside portion of your windshield, as well as a magnetic flag will affix to the top of your vehicle. Please keep in mind, use your bright headlights at all times, as well as your emergency flashers, and try to stay as close to the car in front of you as safety will allow. The Shiva will be observed at the Elegant Residence at 310 Wesley Avenue in Evanston today, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. All this information is listed in the service folder that you received, and for those of you that are viewing online, this information is on our website as well. The following people have been selected to serve as pallbearers this morning. As I call your name, if you would please step forward. Alex Tartakovsky, Richard Marsh, Richard Rothberg, Ben Melnick, Adam Steigerwald, Ted Mendelson, John Mantel, and his honorary pallbearer, Mr. Larry Kurtzen. I'll ask everyone to please rise now in silent tribute to the escort Mr. Ellegant's passing.